putting out possibilities, and other members of the board, of course, might have other even better possibilities. The 7 items I thought at least were worth considering, and these are all process retreats to study mostly process issues. 1, the conduct of board meetings. 2, the process surrounding the superintendent's goals and evaluation process. 3, the budget process. 4, the process for hiring a superintendent. A lot of this is currently pretty much unspecified in policy. The recently created board policy process, an intermediate review of that. An orientation process for new board members is number 6, which we used to have and no longer have, at least not in the same way. And communication among district leadership outside of board meetings. So as I say, those are just 7. I think that would be too much for a day, but those are 7 possibilities. I thought possible timing for this, and again, I'm just bringing this up for discussion. I thought maybe early December might be a reasonable time. In the interim between election and the new board or existing board coming back might be a good time. But as I say, I'm just throwing this out. I think the board would benefit from a discussion of these and possibly other issues, and those are the extent of my current comments.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Foster. Wait, Mr. Hicks, did you want to add anything?
No.
Okay, Ms. Foster.
Could we show, please, on the screen, in the agenda, there was the retreat information that was posted, and I would just like us to watch only 4 minutes. It's not very long at all. Each of us have taken longer than 4 minutes at times to talk. The first one is on, and I'll comment after we look at these 4 minutes. The first one from April 28th. I know we all came together.
We are recording this as a matter of record as well.
And could we go to 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 15 seconds, and just watch that for a minute? And if we could listen to what happened here.
Superintendent will never exceed the excellence of the board.
No.
The board sets the standard, and the board is the exemplar. And so with that in mind, we're going to divide up into tables, so I'll ask all of the administrators to go ahead and take your table, and then I'll ask the board to join each of the individual seats as soon as the administrators move up, and I'll tell you which one you're with first. So go ahead and move up. And turn on the lights a bit more up on the stage so everybody can see, please. And there are enough seats that if members of the community want to come up and sit at any of the tables, they're welcome to. We are recording this as a matter of record as well.
Oh, wait, could we go to could we go to 121.50? I'm sorry, 121.50. Just could we watch a little bit more of that? I'm sorry. I just want to see where different board members went to participate in this.
And if we can have Mr. Juarez with Ms. Carmen Cruz and Ms. Bo, that topic of conversation will be board media communication. And then we have Dr. Morado and Ms. Gallegos, who will visit with Mr. Hicks, and their conversation will be about board and administration on the campus level interaction. And then we have one open, and we'll rotate as Ms. Grijalva isn't here, but we're about to call her in. So we'll call her here in a moment via telephone.
Thank
so
you.
We'll go ahead and...
And then could we go to the second part of that same meeting at the bottom and go to 40 minutes and 30 seconds? Can we turn the lights back down? And we only have 2 board members?
So if the other 2 board members have left, oh, there's Dr. Stegman, and
Yeah, he's still there.
I hadn't seen him during this activity.
All right.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody, for that experience. I think those are so
That was fun.
well run. And Dr. Sanchez, you had a comment
Yes,
you would
ma'am.
like to make before we move to item number 6.
Yes, ma'am. Just a closing comment. Ms. Siegel, who did mention that she had attended the lawyers conference at the National School Board Association conference in Nashville, asked that we take time to document this process and that she feels it's a very good process and fits within open meeting law, and asks that we consider presenting it next year at NSBA or at the National Law Conference as a mechanism by which to really get into a personal setting and situation with law and policy, and to allow people from the community that are at the board meeting to really hear the conversation at a very personal level. So I take that as a good compliment.
Could
I'll
we
be
move
bringing
to-
back in a subsequent board meeting, BCA board
Could we
member
go to
ethics
number-
is kind of a
sorry,
starting
43
point.
minutes?
And then I look forward to
We're taking out of state trips since I've been on the board. We're promised a report, and I think this is the first time we ever got one, and I think that's good. And thank you very much. And I think the idea of having activities like board retreats, which we've done before, I think is a good and constructive process for public bodies generally. But I do think that one of the problems that we have is that we spend too much time talking about ourselves. And I really think that if we focused more exclusively on talking about schools and policies and student achievement, then a lot of our problem would go away.
Great.
But I
And
do
could we go to the
appreciate the
next?
report. Oh, I'll make one other little
Could we go to meeting on September 29th? That was another link that was on the attachment for this evening's agenda item. On September
And I think we
29th.
covered
Could
some
we-
of it.
I'm
So
sorry, could we
should
go to
such an
1
amendment be
hour?
Identified
There
superintendent,
you
in
go.
this case, we
Yep.
can say superintendent/board office shall notify the board member and seek to reschedule a visit. So in this one, I would envision the situation where something's already been pre-scheduled and something occurs on campus, and at that point, superintendent or board office would notify the board member and say, hey, today's really not a good day after all, because either the assistant principal is sick and there's only one administrator on campus, or whatever the reason is. So in this one, it's just, again, about communication. So that's all this one is. It's just a matter of communicating back to the board members and the campus, letting board office know, hey, today's not a good day. So it's process. Mr. Hicks.
That I don't have a problem with. I mean, things come up. If I schedule something, something else comes up that's legitimate. I mean, you know, there's a fight on the campus or whatever. I don't want to be part of that.
Sure.
So those things I agree with. So
All right.
this part I don't have a problem with.
All right. Dr. Stegman.
I think with any member of the public, if the principal had a problem, they would communicate that and seek to reschedule, whether it's directly or through the board office.
Perfect.
So again, I think rules that apply to the public can apply pretty well to board members.
Okay, can you move to
All right,
1 minute
so,
and
yeah,
24?
I mean, this one is
1 hour,
specific
24
to board
minutes and
members, so I'm
15
not
seconds?
Talking about the public.
Our employee for all has children on the campus, so does Mr. Hicks. I think those are important, and I think it's something we should be doing.
All right. All right. Ms. Foster.
Yes, I think we have to wear them everywhere we go.
Mr. Hoff.
Okay, that's good. Thank you so
Yes.
much. And I wanted to bring this up, really, my point, Mark Stegman, is that you didn't participate when we tried this, because we've tried this various times. You didn't think that we should talk about ourselves, we should focus on other things. And then, and at the end, you know, you participate, and then Mr. Hicks left for 10 minutes. You guys didn't even participate when we were at Catalina. You left for that whole time. And I find it insulting that we've tried to do this. Absolutely, we've tried to do this, and I guess I recognize it as good campaigning now that you want to bring this forward. But I think, you know what, if you win this election and bring new people on board, bring this on board then. But right now, we have tried this so many times, and I'm insulted that you say we haven't.
Yeah, Mr. Hicks?
Okay, first of all, that was not a board retreat that we went through over at Catalina. Second of all, I indicated that I thought it was disingenuous that the board members couldn't hear what the other board members were communicating about at each of the tables. So if you really want to go there, that was my issues with that. So in regard, I don't know what this little thing was all about, because you didn't show anything else that went on with it. So, you know, we've had other board retreats, in my time that was here with the former superintendent, where it was the board who sat in the same room and went over and had a facilitator, not the board going and meeting with different people and telling them different things, and other board members not hearing what the other. That is my issue with what happened over there. So.
Okay, Ms. Foster.
If I could quickly respond, that's why I specifically showed that our legal counsel said it was legal, it was good practice, and she suggested we take it to NSBA.
Okay. The only other thing that I want to say is that we did have the kind of retreats that you're talking about, Mr. Hicks, on August 3rd, 2011. That was at the Badger Room. And I believe, let me see, we had Dr. Stegman was president, Ms. Burns was clerk, Miguel Cuevas, me, and you.
Correct.
So we were there. We met for 3.5 hours, and we talked about board protocol in general. We talked about some rules the board should follow during the retreat. And then we had some general discussion. What are your priorities? What motivated you to run? What do you want to accomplish? We talked a little bit about BBAA, different policies, board member authority and responsibilities, communication, legal review. Those were the things that we discussed. We talked about the conduct in board meetings, arriving on time, each board member stating his or her position clearly without repeating when discussion should occur, either before or after the motion, when are we going to vote, let's not waste time, proper preparation prior to board meetings, use of voice votes versus roll call, depending on the situation. Those were the things that we discussed. Presence of board members on the dais during the meeting, importance of brief breaks during the meeting, attention by board members to speakers and presenters, conduct of staff in the audience, and respectful interaction with staff and board committees and subcommittees. So we discussed all of that, and then that's really as far as we got, because we were supposed to talk about board communications with the public and media, agenda preparation, open meeting law, agenda posting, and we didn't address any of those things. So for about 3.5 hours, we talked about that. And then 20 days later, leadership changed. And that was when Dr. Stegeman was voted out of presidency and Mr. Cuevas came in. And then on February 7th of 2012, that's when we were at Santa Rita. And in attendance was Dr. Stegeman was president, elected January of that year. You were clerk, Mr. Hicks, Mr. Cuevas, myself, and Dr. Sugiyama. So, and that was under the Petticone administration. We met at 7 p.m. We met until 9, and pretty much what we did is we had introductions. We talked about outcomes, what we want to do, what we wanted the outcome to be. Participants will improve mutual understanding and communication. We had lessons from Geese, and we discussed that. And then review quality of team, review qualities of a positive team. 5 dysfunctions of a team. I mean, those were when we started doing that. We did not get into, we discussed board meetings and executive session. We did not get into requests for information, media or public relations, employee or public correspondence, cabinet correspondence and communications or others, because it was 9 o'clock and board members at the time were going to go ahead and end it there. That was the allotted time we had from 7 to 9. So I guess and then this was 4 months later, there was a leadership change again, where Dr. Stegeman stepped down at that time from president and Mr. Cuevas became president. So what I'm trying to say is we've continued to talk about the same issues. I do think that the timing was better because at that time in August, we had a board that was going to be working together then for about 2 years. And then in 2012, we had Dr. Sugiyama join the board. And so we voted, I think we had a relatively healthy discussion, but it was basic cursory things. So what I'm trying to get at is if we're going to talk about genuine change, then we have to stop recycling the same items if the board is going to continue to work together. And so my thought was, like I discussed when I talked about NSBA, that when you're in the middle of an election season and where there is a potential change in leadership is not the best time to have a retreat. Because if we're speaking about disingenuous, a lot of times what happens as a result of those times is it's a lot of grandstanding for the sake of an election season. So my thought would be, if we are going to have a board retreat, then we should discuss it and what we're going to discuss as a board after the election, because whatever board members are there should have the opportunity to weigh in on what they want to discuss. And that's exactly what we did in February of 2012. We sort of waited. And so, you know, we continue to talk about the same things. A lot of the things that were discussed at these meetings were about, you know, people being disrespectful, people micromanaging. I mean, you know, I think that we have to look to who the consistent players are on this board and the same complaints that we have over and over, because it's not leadership, it's not our superintendent, because our superintendent has changed. It's, you know, the general discussion, as a board, how does the community perceive you? This is all board members in 2011. Incompetent, dysfunctional, working in secret, political, fail to oversee, micromanage, indecisive. And that's when the leadership was Dr. Stegeman and Ms. Burns. Those were comments that we had then. And so my thought would be, if we're going to have a genuine discussion and if there's a genuine willingness to change, then I don't have an issue with retreats. I've never have. But my frustration is, you know, we spend hours and hours, administration spends hours and hours gathering information for us. One, we don't get through the agenda, and we don't get through, there isn't really a significant change in behavior. And so until there is a willingness on the part of board members to change conduct and behavior, I don't see how we can meet endlessly for retreats on end and nothing's going to get resolved.
Ms. Corral.
Dr. Stegeman, Mr. Hicks, and then Ms. Foster.
Okay, I have a couple of points. First, I think that the last few minutes probably illustrates well why it might make sense for us to have a retreat at this point. It sounds like you agree that December would be a good timing for a retreat, so I'm glad to hear that. The topics that I mentioned for a retreat are mostly different from the things that you mentioned, so if there's concern about repetition, then I think there wouldn't be. But on the other hand, if those other topics from before are still relevant, then maybe they should be included. And I think it would be reasonable for the board to discuss what should be included. You said that we hadn't got through our whole agendas the times before, and that is true. And the 7 things that I mentioned, I'm sure would be too much for a normal retreat. As I said at the outset, I think it is important to put some bounds on it so that you can have an adequate discussion about whatever that is. And then I just want to go back to the video that we saw. My concern about that particular process, and this is somewhat similar to Mr. Hicks' remark, is that whether or not it could be interpreted narrowly as being within the open meeting law, I felt that it was outside the spirit of the open meeting law to have a public meeting that devolved into private discussions. And that was my reason for not wanting to participate in that. So I guess that's about it. It sounds to me that, like Ms. Grijalva might support having a retreat, and I think it'd be great if all board members provided their input on that. And of course, if there was change in membership, that could be revised, but I don't think it means that we shouldn't discuss it now. And I appreciate that. And maybe we should have a process where all board members make suggestions over the next several weeks, and staff could kind of put that together, and we could start making a plan.
Mr. Hicks.
Okay, I'm just going to make a statement. Although Ms. Foster indicated that I got up and left for at least 10 minutes. If you recall, last week during a call of the audience, we had a member communicating to the board, and we had 2 board members get up along with the superintendent and walk out on that speaker. So talk about disingenuous. That to me is also, and I don't believe I've ever got up and walked out on a call to the audience. Thank you.
Ms. Grijalva?
Ms. Foster.
So a comment and then a question. Well, the question first, so that the agendas that you read from were open session, special meetings, and just like the ones we did when Dr. Sanchez came, they were the exact same. Our legal counsel said this does not break open meeting law, and she is a lawyer, and she's actually on the open meeting law official committee for the state, and so I don't think it's fair to say that her opinion isn't right. And so because of that, I don't, and my comment is to not participate. That is what is trumping the process for our board to move forward. And so my suggestion is, let's wait to December to start the whole conversation. Or maybe January 1st, when everybody's sworn in, when new people, if 5 of us are here again, let's start our counseling sessions January 1st. I don't think we should use our precious time right now. We have so much staff, so much work that comes forward. Our agendas are so long. I think we hold off on this item until January 2017.
Okay, thank you.
And just to say, we've tried. We have absolutely tried. And Mr. Hicks also said it wasn't fair to show this. I spent 3 hours today listening to the whole thing and finding the points that were important to me, and that was available for everybody to do.
So, and the other thing I do want to say, Dr. Stegman, is that I agree that a board retreat would be a good idea after we have a board that is committed to working together for at least 2 years. And I don't believe that in the middle of an election, that's something we should do. 1, 2, the process for hiring a superintendent, we go over when we are actually going to hire a superintendent. That process is fairly standard. If we want changes to that, the board that is going to be interviewing and deciding if and when a new superintendent is hired, that board is the board that has historically done that. The same goes for the evaluation of the superintendent. All of these things do not have to be in policy because every board may want to conduct the process a little different. Maybe the tool would be a little different. And so what we've done in the past is different people have suggested what the tool would be. The superintendent may have suggested what the tool will be. And so I do think that a lot of the issues that are being brought up, conduct at board meetings, that's something that has come up several times. Board policy processes, whatever the board policy is, we have a listing of what those are. Orientation process, Ms. Foster and Mr. Juarez can probably speak to what that process was for them, but that process was very different than it was for me, than it was for you and Mr. Hicks. And so getting together an orientation, I don't have an issue with that because that's something that was discussed at NSBA. And then communication among district leadership outside board meetings, that was an agendized item that we didn't get to because of time. So I do think that every time we've had a board retreat, there have been significant other communication issues, and that's why we haven't gone through the process very far in a 2-hour meeting or a 3.5-hour retreat. I mean, I just brought those issues up because I'd like to reiterate the fact that this is not a new concern for this board, and the fact that 3 of the board members that are here right now were a part of what I'm assuming is the kind of process you want when you're discussing having another retreat. Everyone in the same room, everyone talking, getting a facilitator. We've done that, and I think that if we ask some of the participants that were there at the different retreats that we've had, I think if memory serves, there was a smattering of participation, kind of limited participation and contribution. And so I think that there has to be a commitment amongst all of the board members if we're going to go into a retreat to do that. And I would like to give that sort of, it was like a quiz that I picked up at NSBA to get an idea of what other board members want and what they are expecting out of a retreat. And once we get the information, what we're willing to do with that information. And so if you just want to discuss, superintendent's goals, that process is coming up fairly soon. And if you want to discuss board policy process, we can discuss that in open meeting. It doesn't have to be a retreat item. Dr. Stegman.
Well, a retreat, as we've done it before, is an open meeting. That's the process that we've used, is we've just had an open meeting, but these are the sorts of things that occur at that open meeting. We haven't closed those to the public. I think, again, this discussion, if anything, underscores that it would be good to have a retreat. I thought the old retreats were productive, that Dr. Fagan and Dr. Petticone put quite a bit of effort into them, and I think they were good. I think that the agenda should be limited, because it is true that there's only so much you can get through. And as I said 7 things that I think make sense, and other board members presumably have their own suggestions. I do think, it doesn't have to be at a retreat, but I do think that it is a weakness, this is just my opinion, that we have no policy or consistent process for superintendent hiring and evaluation. I've been through 3 superintendent hiring processes, one before I was on the board, on the external committee, and 2 since then, and each one's been quite different. And that maybe that's the way we like it, but I'm not sure that that's produces optimal outcomes, and the evaluation process also varies considerably over time, and I think it might make sense to have more structure on it. But if that's not the things that the board wants to discuss, then we can not do those things and do these other things, or whatever things the other board members feel are most pressing. I'm only suggesting things, not in any way trying to dictate the agenda for it.
Well, and I appreciate that. I just think that there has to be a willingness on the part of the board members that are going to participate to change behavior. And if that's not going to change, then what ends up happening is the board members change, which is what happened as a result of both of the last retreats that we had with this type of process. So I do think that we need to have a conversation and a commitment that we all are willing to change behavior if we want the conduct of our board meetings to be more productive, and that has not been the case in any of the retreats that we participated in. There has not been a change in behavior, and until there is, I just feel like some of these other issues we can discuss here at the dais. We don't have to ask staff to come back for a special meeting. We don't have to ask the superintendent to prepare any additional information. We don't have to pay somebody to come in to facilitate a retreat, because these are things that we can talk about here at the dais. And I know that it's an open meeting, but one of the reasons why you have a retreat and schedule it somewhere off is so you can have a more intimate setting. And I'm just not sure that there is a willingness on the part of all 5 board members to make commitments to certain things. Because while you don't want to talk about personalities and personal issues, much of the stressors that are happening with this team of 5 and our superintendent team of 6 has to do with conduct of board members. And I'm not saying that that any of us are exempt, but I do think that if we're going to work together as a team, there has to be a commitment to make some change, and that has not been the case not since 2011. Dr. Sanchez, then Ms. Foster.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to point out that working in 2 previous districts, I had the opportunity to facilitate conversations very similar to what we were doing here in Tucson Unified. And it does help when all board members are bought into working as a team of 6. And in previous 2 districts, we had 7 board members in each of those districts. And the entire administrative team worked with the board because we're a support to the board. I mean, we see ourselves as such. And, at the pleasure of the board, I've facilitated these conversations, and it was great to facilitate them because in the end, I take direction from the board. And I've been through the training to do that, and I'm already on staff, so budgeting and scheduling isn't a problem. I'm already there. And we know the policies that are most pressing because, in a very personal way, we know the issues that have been challenging. And I still have the list. I mean, what we were working on with the board were curriculum and instruction policies where we would get to talk about standardized assessment and setting standards for what our curriculum should have, and the opportunity to delve into assessment and evaluation and scoring, all the things that I've heard different board members say are important to them. We had policies that we were going to center the conversation around. And so I'll just say that I hope that the board will consider at the point in time when a retreat is scheduled, it's very important to not just have conversations that are philosophical in nature, but are really grounded in policy, because if the policy's there and the whole board can take a look at best practice and research and what high-performing districts do, and they use that to guide the policy, then that guides the regulation, that guides the principals, that guides the teachers, that educate the students. And so there are very good processes in place, and I, again, offer my services in doing that, and you know, with us having to all work together, and I think that it's important that we do that, and so I'm open and available for that, and I have still a list of all the policies that I had presented at the board at the point in time that we tried to do this the last 4 times.
Ms. Foster, then Mr. Hicks, then Dr. Steigman.
Could we go back to that agenda on the screen, and on this agenda item, the retreat information? Because we see that, no, it's this one, because in April it was study, and so the first one was revision of BDAA, and so that's not necessarily the board retreat part. And then we all participated in the strategic planning session in February. And then almost in April, we did a study session, then July a study session, and then September a study session. So these were 3 board retreats to have us to create the responsibilities, rights and responsibilities handbook for best practices for governing board members. Why didn't this move forward, Dr. Sanchez, and why didn't we vote on this item? Why did we stop this work?
Yes, ma'am. You know, without getting all 5 board members to participate, and I even changed the format to where the last one was, or the last couple were here, and everybody could hear everybody else, and we weren't breaking into groups, even though Ms. Siegel, who was on the who worked for the Attorney General for the state of Arizona on the Open Meetings Law Enforcement team, I love it, the omelet team, said what we were doing was fully within the bounds of Arizona Open Meetings Law. I went ahead and changed the format for the comfort of the board, but I couldn't get the full board participation, and it just wasn't going to be meaningful to recommend a policy revision or to create a board member's rights and responsibilities document if all 5 board members weren't bought into creating this board member rights and responsibilities document, because as Arizona state law purports, I can't hold the board accountable. The board can't hold itself accountable. Only the voters can hold the board accountable. So a board member rights and responsibility document is only as good as the commitment of the board members who are committed to the process of creating the rights and responsibility document. And if you don't have all 5 board members working to create the board rights and responsibilities document, then you don't have a board member rights and responsibility document. Instead, you have some that think this is how it should go and others that are going to keep doing what they're doing. So you have to have a collective commitment. I mean, it's a teamwork mentality. And when you look at board member rights and responsibility documents and processes, high-functioning districts and districts in southern Arizona as well as in Maricopa do have rights and responsibilities protocols. They have board handbooks, and they know how to communicate with each other, and they know how to communicate with council and superintendent, the documents, the types of requests, communication with the media, how to get agenda items on, how to work through difficult issues. All of those things are laid out in there, but they're not laid out by this is what the superintendent wants, this is what the board president wants. It's what the board wants, and legal counsel works through the rights and responsibilities document to make sure that everything that the board is requesting in the rights and responsibilities document meets Arizona open meeting law. So then legal counsel has his role or her role, depending on the district, in ensuring that everything lines up with statute as well as policy, and if any policy needs to change, that those policies are then brought forward, and so the rights and responsibilities reflect state law, reflects board policy, and it's very cohesive. So any new board member that would come in, if a board member retires or decides not to run again, the next board member could come in and have a document that lays out all their rights and responsibilities as a board member, and it's something created of the board, by the board, for the board to serve the district. So that was the impetus behind really working to that. But again, you know, if you can't get all of the board to participate, then it's not going to work. So it's a fool's errand.
And just quick follow-up, then the training you've had on leading retreats, then that is the work you are doing with us. I mean, that
yes,
is the
ma'am.
goal and the objective of a board member retreat, is what you were trying to lead us through that we couldn't finish because not people didn't participate.
Yes, ma'am. The whole focus of a retreat is to come up with that board member rights and responsibilities document that guides board conduct, that's central to many of the things that Dr. Stegman had on his list. I mean, those are policy pieces that can get rolled in, and it's a good process. I mean, I just felt awful that we couldn't get the thing launched, and we were very hopeful because then it provides new administrators. Dr. Kopek this is her second meeting as deputy superintendent, so it provides somebody coming in either on administration or board a clear understanding of how the board functions, because different communities have different ways the board function, and it's good to know here's a document, you can find it online, and here are the board's collective commitments. I mean, in a funny way, it's the same thing we're doing with positive behavior intervention support on school campuses, where all the teachers work with the principal and the kids and the community to come up with a way of how discipline is going to work on campuses. So it's very similar.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Mr. Hicks and Dr. Stegman.
Thank you for making my point, because I distinctly remember tables being around in this, and Dr. Stegeman and myself all participated. I distinctly remember tables being lined up over here and us all going through together and doing things. So telling me that I don't, or that we did not participate is a lie. Second of all, those were workshops. Those are not board retreats. Look up the definitions, because those were workshops. I don't mind dealing with workshops, but we should not be having workshops in regards to our policies in that, and separately communicating about our beliefs about a policy. We should do that. We're a collective body. We should be doing this collectively, not having staff to have listed of questions, and we're asked those questions, and we're supposed to respond to those questions, and only those questions. So in regards to that, those are the problems that I have with that. And if you have any more of those like that with policies, I don't care who you are, I will not participate. If we cannot sit down as 5 board members and communicate, I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything, but I can be swayed on different things by hearing somebody else coming up and say, hey, you know what, maybe this thing. Then I listen, and maybe I'll change my mind. But if I'm coming out and I'm only doing this in one area and not hearing anyone else, and coming back 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks later and giving us your interpretation of what we said, doesn't cut it either. I'm sorry, it doesn't cut it. I need to be listening to the communication at the time that it's happening, and I take offense saying that we have not participated. We have participated. We sat here and we've done this a number of times. So quit saying that we do
Okay,
not
thank you.
participate.
Differently. The
Okay,
video shows
thank you.
differently.
Dr. Stegeman.
Just a couple quick points. First, I don't have the comment was made about the paid facilitator. I don't have a particular position on that. I think in one of the 2 cases we had a paid facilitator, and in one case I think we had a facilitator who maybe was a volunteer. I think it probably, or maybe he was paid as well. I don't remember, but we could do it with that person or without that person. I have no fixed view on that. I'm not sure the superintendent is the most natural person to be a facilitator if you have one, but I'm open to different possibilities. And secondly, I never questioned, just for clarity, I never questioned Ms. Tollison's legal judgment. I simply
It was
said,
Siegel.
Ms. Siegel, sorry, whoever it was. I didn't question their legal judgment. I simply felt, as Mr. Hicks felt, that having the board break up into private groups was outside the spirit of the open meeting law, outside the spirit of it, and not what boards normally do. And that's why I didn't favor that process. But as far as I remember, when we brought the process back to the dais and we were all having the discussion at the same time, as far as I remember, I was participating in all of that, and I don't remember that anyone else wasn't. So I think we did all participate in that, and I thought that was, it wasn't exactly a retreat, but I thought it was better.
So I guess one of my issues is we had 2 different attorneys tell us that that process was not outside of the scope, but you are not an attorney and feel that it was outside the scope. So I think that
They don't like
we
it,
have
so
we
they
have
don't
two we have 2 different legal opinions. If that is, we have 2 different opinions that tell us, 2 legal opinions that tell us the same thing, and a feeling that it's not. So my concern is, if we have legal advice, I think that we should take it, especially it's from 2 different people. But if what we're saying is, in the future, when we do schedule a retreat, that we'd like to all sit in the same room together, have the superintendent be a part of the team of 6, and have an outside facilitator who, in both cases, both were compensated. So I just want to make sure that we understand that. Then I don't have an issue with that. My issue is the timing of it. And and I do think that I don't have an issue with discussing a retreat once the election is over. If we have all of the same board members, then we can move forward quickly. If we don't, then I think that we should wait until new board members join the team, and then the team decides what those topics should be. So I don't think that it's something that should happen in December. I don't know anything else. Mr. Hicks?
I just have a quick, and please remind me, did the board vote to have those type of retreats? Or were we told we were going to have those types of retreats?
I think if I recall correctly, Dr. Sanchez had suggested it because it's just a different way to get input, and then you have one-on-one input. Yeah, the one board member gets to share as much information as they want, and then it can be collected. It's just a different way to gather information.
Okay, but if I remember correctly, they were already set up and we were told what we were going to do, if my memory serves me correctly. And even if we had 15 lawyers tell us that that's okay, we did not agree to it. I don't believe that this board, as a collective body, agreed to doing that. There's my issue.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, the logistics of how the setup of the workshop, I guess, can be a topic of conversation if and when a board retreat is scheduled. Anything else? Okay. Now we're on study governing board policy IHBF, homebound instruction revision. Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go ahead and invite Ms. Clark Engel up, and she can talk about the IHBF homebound instruction revision. And it's a tweak. Mr. Jager has taken a look at it as well. And so we can pull up the document. Gene, if you can pull up the document so everybody can see it. And then Ms. Clark Engel can discuss the revision to the policy. This, of course, is the first step in the process. If the board looks at this document, feels good about this document, then we can post the document. After we post the document, we can get feedback. Once we get feedback, if there aren't any issues, and we'll bring it back to the board for study action in August, and we can move from there.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Sanchez, legal counsel. This policy is designed to explicitly identify homebound services. So in exceptional ed, we provide services, of course, across a whole continuum. And depending on the needs of the student, we decide what those services look like. If students are unable to participate in a school setting, then we provide homebound services. Those services are defined by our ADE as students needing services in the home based on the recommendations of a physician. And so we look at it for students who don't have the vitality or the stamina to participate in school, and we can provide those services in the home if that need be. We have had some issues with parents who have not quite understood what homebound services are, so we were asked to put this in to clarify that homebound services and the need for homebound services is not defined specifically, that it's provided as students need on a case-to-case basis, and so that we can't deny a student homebound services because they don't meet a certain criteria.
Okay. This is a study item, so Mr. Hicks, do you want to roll up the red part just so we can see what the addition
Yes,
is?
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hicks, then Dr. Stegman.
Mine's real quick. Does this follow in line with ASBA?
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hicks, board members, and Dr. Sanchez. Actually, this is an additional provision beyond the language that's contained in the pro forma from ASBA. This is language that we've agreed to include in our form of the policy pursuant to a resolution agreement with the Office of Civil Rights. So this goes beyond the ASBA language. While it's consistent with it, doesn't violate the recommendation of ASBA, it does go a little bit further than ASBA's pro forma does.
What's the implications of other districts seeing this and seeing the ASBA? Is there any?
No, sir. We have a right to modify the policy as we need to for our own purposes, and it has no implications certainly for other districts, and we have no obligation to ASBA as a consequence.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Stegman.
So the impetus for this is an agreement with OCR? Is that what I'm hearing?
Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is. And, you know, there are two ways to go about this. We could challenge the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, and incur legal fees, and we could end up with a court order that says you have to include this anyway. But because legal counsel has looked at it and advised that it doesn't materially change anything, rather it provides greater clarity for a parent. It provides greater clarity. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change state law. And it makes more sense to do this than to, you know, challenge the Office of Civil Rights and end up in litigation. I just don't think that's wise or a good use of staff's time when it's something that provides a good sense of clarity.
Right. Dr. Stegman.
So usually when the OCR closes a case, there's a letter. Did we get a letter in this case?
We have not. It's not been closed.
Oh, I see. So we're doing this in the hope of generating that letter.
Yes, sir.
So do we have any, and I understand this, different cases are a little different. Do we have any written guidance from them, or this is just the result of discussions?
There was written formats asking for this specific addition to be put into the policy.
And so this is essentially language that the OCR was specifically recommending?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I don't, I mean, I'm reading it, and I just think that it's to provide more clarity. It doesn't commit the district to anything that we're not already legally obligated to do, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it actually does, really for everyone, for our staff
Yeah.
and our parents to provide that clarity, to make sure that everybody understands what that looks like and how we provide those services.
All right. Mr. Hicks.
And just in regards to the Individuals with Disability Act, that's pretty broad. I actually am handicapped, not just in my mind, but my back, my shoulder, and my fingers. And so, I mean, technically, I would fall under that. So would I fall under, because I fall under the ADA on that, be able to challenge and be able to get homebound instruction?
I can address that.
Dr. Sanchez.
This is all done through the IEP meetings or the individual education plan and program meetings, where our educational psychologists take a look at an FBA or a functional behavioral assessment of the student. There's a schedule of services that's created of the schedule of services based on the FBA, based on the psychologist's recommendation. Does purport that service is required in the home and criteria are recommended. You have the principal, the parent, members of the IEP committee agree, it's signed. At that point, yes. But there are multiple steps, and the FBA is key and critical. The IEP meeting is key and critical, and the information from the educational experts designated by the Exceptional Education Department, as well as those that are recognized by Arizona State statute and IDEA, will then be the ones that will provide that assessment, and they have to meet a certain level of training and criteria to be able to provide that assessment and advisement. So it's not as quick and easy as I want it and I get it. There are multiple steps. There's multiple steps of appeal. There's a timeline for appeal. There's arbitration. And so this just basically says this policy doesn't limit us in meeting the full federal obligation under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act or under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Right.
Right, but my thing is we already say that already, do we not?
Sure, yes, sir. That's implied by law.
Okay, so I'm just not, I'm just trying to wrap my head, I'm not saying no to this or anything, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this as to why we're having to add more when we already say it.
Sure.
Is it just in layman's terms? Is
No,
it?
I think really plainly, the Office of Civil Rights has reviewed our policy and said that they have concerns, and other people in our district, I mean, from what I've heard, have had concerns about this. And so what they're putting this here to explain the fact that nothing in the policy above is intended to limit the district's obligation to provide free education. I mean, that's.
And correct.
Yeah, that's it.
And I agree.
I think.
But
I mean,
now,
unless I'm missing something.
but now, and my question back to the ASBA, wouldn't they be looking at all of ASBA and seeing this within the entire state of Arizona and saying, hey, this isn't correct? So that I'm not opposed to this. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this as to why we're being singled out on a policy such as this, which is an ASBA policy, and we're having to make it more restrictive than other districts. So I'm
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
perhaps this will help. Mr. Hicks, board members, this is in specific response to a specific complaint brought to OCR by a third party. This is OCR's recommendation to us as one means of resolving the matter. It is not actually a finding by OCR that there's anything wrong with the ASBA policy in general. It is specific to our situation and one means they've provided to us in our specific circumstance to resolve one matter. It is, frankly, a restatement of what the law is, that while we have a policy concerning homebound instruction, that the law requires us sometimes to do certain things, and nothing in this policy is intended to limit our obligation to provide a free, appropriate public education.
okay.
So-
It just it just sounds like there's something more to it than that's all. Thank you.
Dr. Stegeman.
Well, let's clarify that, and then I do have one quick question. The issue is that someone complained that we were not complying with the law. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. And so the OCR, as a means of resolving that complaint, is requesting us to put this language in policy as a way of reminding the district to fulfill its obligations. In essence, is that a fair characterization of what's going on? I mean, that's what typically happens in these cases. Is that-
Madam President, Dr. Stegman, I would actually disagree, knowing something about the facts here. It's not that we were necessarily doing anything wrong. Really what this comes down to some large extent, is semantics and what one person defines as homebound instruction, another person may not. Homebound instruction has a very specific meaning under Arizona law, and we are qualified to provide homebound instruction under very specific circumstances when a student qualifies for those services under state law. Many parents misinterpret what homebound instruction is as compared to perhaps home-based instruction or home-provided instruction, which might be for a very short duration of time. Contrast that, of course, with homebound instruction, which usually involves a student who's going to be out for months of a school year. So this was really a clarification, and it helps parents and us kind of appreciate the extent to which we might need to go in order to provide FAPE.
Right. So yes, I thank you for that. I shouldn't have said that because there was no finding, there is no letter, there was no finding against us. So I shouldn't say that there is a presumption that we were out of compliance. This is the part of the resolution that will lead to a resolution letter. So I thank you.
Yes, sir.
I didn't say exactly the right thing. My question is, do you happen to know how many of our students are currently receiving home instruction from us?
Through our direct to link, I want to say we have about 50, someplace in the 50 mark that we have receiving homebound services.
Okay, and that's encompasses everything. You said through direct link.
Yes, we have a program called Direct Link. We call it that, right?
But there's nothing outside of that. You're saying we are.
To
the
my
50,
understanding.
The 50 is comprehensive.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So just as a reminder, board, this is a study item. So if you have any other questions, you can forward them to Mary Alice or Dr. Sanchez. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.